Welcome, everyone, and to those of you who've just joined, welcome to Oksana and RS who have joined as well in just the past few moments. Michael Dixon, I see your hand up. If you want to use the Q&A to give a comment or question, you can, or if your hand's up by mistake, that's okay too. We have two very distinguished guests with us today. I'll start with our normal introduction that our webinar series is organized by Jeffrey Glynn with the Peace Corps virtual service, who is based out of Ukraine, although not currently in Ukraine, but based out of Ukraine typically. Roman Aleksenko, a community project manager based in Kyiv. Olga Nikolska, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Olga, with isar.ednannia, an NGO based in Kyiv. And by myself, Sarah Wilson Sokhey. I'm a political science professor at the University of Colorado. This webinar series is co-sponsored by PONARS Eurasia at George Washington University, isar.ednannia, an NGO based in Kyiv, and the University of Colorado Boulder. Most of you, all of you know this, but you can ask questions and engage using the Q&A function on Zoom. Use that just like you would a chat. And you can see the website for our speaker series in the chat, and you can email with questions and comments during the webinar if you need to the email address that's listed in the chat. So we are very, very honored to have two extremely distinguished guests with us today. We have Dr. Yuliya Bidenko, an associate professor at Karazin Kharkiv National University, who has also served as an expert for the EU delegation to Ukraine's initiative Team Europe. We also have Anzhelika Bielova, who is a regional representative from Zaporizhia on the Ukrainian Women's Congress, also the founder of the Voice of Romni, and a recent participant in the International Visitor Leadership Program that's organized by the U.S. Department of State. And so Anzhelika recently was in the United States seeing 5 different cities, I believe. We'll talk more about that. And has also recently testified before the UN, not for the first time. And so we're really honored that you're taking the time to talk with us today to give us your perspective on what's going on in Ukraine and how things are going. We like to start, as always, by asking both of you, both Yuliya and Anzhelika, how are you doing right now?
May I start then?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. First of all, I'm honored to speak today to your auditory. So today it is another day that started with pain and tragedy for me and for Ukrainian society, because tonight and this morning, Russia launched a massive attack on Ukraine's southeastern region, Dnipropetrovsk. And the result of this attack, 8 people were killed, including 2 children, and more than 25 people were wounded. So my thoughts with the families of all killed people and with those who are currently wounded.
Thank you for that. And Yuliya?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I feel differently than Anzhelika do, because my family is in Kharkiv, my students are in Kharkiv, and I have a lot of friends who are living in Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Chernihiv, who are activists, and really it's heartbreaking what is happening on a daily basis with Ukrainian cities, especially those which are close to a front line, because I know from my own experience in Kharkiv that really Russia uses this terroristic tactic, to make civilians leave these cities and to live under the condition of internal fearing of being killed by a Russian missile.
It's a powerful reminder that the war is very still much happening and active, that people are still dying, that Ukraine is still being attacked. We like to follow up that question of how you're doing with also, how do you envision a Ukrainian victory? What does Ukrainian victory mean to you?
I wouldn't say that my vision is very much different from the vision of whole Ukrainian society. According to recent surveys, 88% of Ukrainians in total believe in Ukrainian victory. And for the majority of Ukrainian people, it means that Ukraine is restoring its territorial integrity, including Crimea and Donbass. Very interesting fact here, due to this poll, that actually there are no differences between Ukrainian regions in perception of the future victory. So, of course, people getting less optimistic comparatively to this rally around the flag effect in 2022, when 99% of Ukrainians believe that Ukrainian victory will be very soon. But now, after the 2 years of invasion, we have 88% again of Ukrainians who still believe that they will win this war.
That is an astounding number, that after 2 years of war and the enormous cost on the country, that people still have a tremendously high faith in that. And also that for all we hear about, and we'll talk about diversity in Ukraine, people are not divided on victory for Ukraine, which is important to emphasize, I think. Anzhelika, what does Ukrainian victory mean for you?
My vision is the same. My vision, it is a returning of all the occupied territories. It is our victory. It is returning of all occupied territories, including Crimea, and our joining of the European Union. And for me, victory means liberation from Russia and the consequences of the Russification of Ukrainian society, democratic, free and independent Ukraine, where democracy, human rights, and diversity are valued first and foremost.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then our topic today that we'll pivot to is talking about diversity in Ukraine and diversity across Ukraine in a lot of different dimensions. And so both of you have different perspectives on and different experiences with diversity across Ukraine. But I wonder if both of you could speak broadly to how the challenges and experience of the war today vary across the country of Ukraine. Because in the West, in the United States and Europe, the coverage of Ukraine, I don't think gives a lot of the nuance of what the country actually looks like and what the experiences are for people, what the differences are. So I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on what the challenges and experience of the war are and how they vary across Ukraine for different groups and in different places. And either of you can start with that question.
So the challenges for me look like, for the frontline territories, it is, of course, it is constant shelling, it is education and employment in the case of constant hostilities. But at the same time, almost all regions are under constant terror of Russia, and even those that are 200, 300 kilometers or more from the front line suffer from rocket attacks, as Dnipropetrovsk region has suffered today. But for the western parts of Ukraine, it is about meeting the needs of IDPs who were forced to leave their homes. This includes humanitarian aid, employment, economic opportunities, and education. Often educational institutions in safer regions are overcrowded. But as a representative of a Roma organization, I constantly say that the war has deepened the vulnerability of already vulnerable communities, such as the Roma community. And today we work both, our organization work both in frontline areas where we support local and IDPs, and in the western parts of Ukraine where the largest Roma community in Ukraine lives, mostly in compact settlements, often without access to clean water, heating, gas, and due to the reduction of financial assistance to Ukraine, today we are facing a decrease in the possibility of humanitarian assistance to vulnerable groups in the frontline areas, which are a priority for the donors. And in the western part of Ukraine, such support is extremely low because it does not fall into the category of frontline or areas with constant shellings. So we are trying to change these priorities through the priorities of our stakeholders, donor partners, through our advocacy.
And I want to get Yuliya's perspective on this too, but I wonder if I could follow up on that because you were talking about the Roma community and how more vulnerable groups that were already vulnerable are becoming more vulnerable because of the war. Could you talk more about your organization that you're the founder of Voice of Romni, when you created it, the work you do with it, why you do that? Because that seems like such an important part of this experience.
Yes, thank you for that question. I created Voice of Romni, Roma Women's Organization, in 2020 in Zaporizhia. This is my hometown. And I already had an experience in the Roma social movement. And I saw that women's leadership in Roma community was very weak due to the patriarchal culture to which the Roma community belongs. And in 2019, I faced an attempted feminicide. An unknown man with a knife tried to kill me at the entrance of my house, and I was saved by the doctors. My daughter was 4 months old at the time, and after the surgery, I kept thinking about how to make this world safer. And that's why one of the cross-cutting activities of my organization, it is to combat and prevent gender-based violence. And in addition, in 2020, when I founded the organization, COVID-19 pandemic began, causing many Roma women to lose their jobs and livelihoods. And we developed a pilot project that helped in 1.5 years, 74 Roma women from 2 regions of Ukraine, Zaporizhia and Dnipro, to obtain a specialty and find a job. And when the full-scale invasion started, we changed, sometimes changed our priorities, like at the first months of of the full-scale invasion, and we provided a humanitarian aid and multi-purpose cash assistance, but we understand that humanitarian aid not gives a lot of long-term results. And that's why we are combining different areas, economical empowerment, and this project, which we started in 2020, became a new sense, because a lot of women from eastern part of Ukraine, they became an IDPs, and they're trying to find a job in western parts of Ukraine, for example. They lost their jobs, of course, and we are trying to help them to obtain specialities, with retraining courses. We opened women's spaces, children's spaces in 3 regions of Ukraine, and humanitarian offices in 4 regions of Ukraine: Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, and Zakarpattia region. We have a lot of different requests from parents, for example, if we are talking about educational spaces, because psychological help, for example, and consultations, it is still a big request, because a lot of children with PTSD symptoms, with social adaptation problems, and we are trying to help them with that. And the last priority of our organization, it is advocacy and leadership, because we know how it is challenging to be a local Roma organization, because we know this path, and we are trying to help to invest in Roma women leadership, and to pay more attention for trainings, for sub-granting, and to give them opportunity to help more and more Roma community and other vulnerable people in Ukraine. Because, for example, our organization only in 2023 helped 44,000 people. And if such organizations will be more, we will help more people. And that's why we are investing in leadership also.
It's really powerful to hear about the layers and layers of really tragedy of how people have been affected. And especially with the Roma, a group of people that are not getting a lot of attention, certainly not internationally, although there are people like you working very hard to increase that attention on populations like the Roma, but also domestically as well. So for Yuliya, I wanted to turn to you, and you're a professor at Karazin, Kharkiv National University, so also a place that's very much directly affected by the conflict and fighting, and in recent times has been very deeply affected and attacked. So I wonder if you could say as well, sort of speaking to those challenges across the country, and I think there's obvious connections with sort of the internal movement of people as well with what Anzhelika has been saying.
Yeah, thank you for this question. It just popped up in my mind that in 2021, just before the full-scale invasion, I was a co-author for the regional program of the development of civil society, and Roma community and representatives of Roma organization were extremely active in discussing the project of the program. And if Russia wouldn't invade Ukraine in 2022, probably Ukraine already will improve the situation with the Roma communities and other civic organizations. Because in 2022, when we supposed to provide regional cost, public cost for NGOs, unfortunately, this budget was frozen and rewarded to the defense and security needs of the region. But thank you for this question. And for me, talking about diversity and diversity of experiences, it's really hard sometimes because it is not easy to, split my personality. I want to speak as a political scientist from the one hand, and from another, I really have my own experience of my students and family who are still in Kharkiv. I have a conversation with my dad, who is in the region, in a village not far from Kharkiv. They have no electricity for 10 hours in a row. And it is very challenging in the village because the heating and water supplies also depends on the electricity there. So let me remind you that due to the recent Russians' attack on Kharkiv, almost all thermal electricity plants were destroyed there. So people mostly have no electricity during the whole day. And I really appreciate those my students who are in Kharkiv, and they try to join our Zoom lectures using mobile phones because the cell phones and mobile connection is still available. Thank for Ukrainian businesses for that. They also a great part of the overall Ukrainian cohesion and resilience. The other problem which triggered me when I traveled from western part to Kharkiv this January was the differences in the lifestyles that people have there, because I know that there are no safe regions, and I would say that everybody is affected by the war in Ukraine, but still I'm somehow jealous to my colleagues from Lviv, from Ivano-Frankivsk, even from Uzhhorod, who has the grateful opportunity to teach their students offline in person, because nowadays in Kharkiv, I would say half of the buildings of one of the largest universities in Ukraine, Karazin Kharkiv National University, are destroyed. Moreover, we have, I would say, 1/3 of students, at my personal estimation, who are abroad, who fled the city, but also fled the country. Others are staying in Kharkiv. Some are displaced within Ukraine. And it is very important for me, as for professor, try to arc the activities, the experience, and keep them energetic. And for them, I would say, they confess me that attending lectures, being active, being good in studying is also the input in resilience, but not only with that. Half of my students, even freshmates, begin volunteering since the full-scale invasion started. And we have teenagers of 17, 18 years old who really provided humanitarian aid and support for their neighbors, for elderly people, for animals and abounded pets. So there are varieties of experience, and due to sociological polls published recently by International Republican Institute, 1/3 of Ukrainians have their own experience of being involved in volunteering on a daily basis or from time to time, which is a huge number of people regarding post-communist experience and these, patterns which were provided by the Soviet Union and Russia, that it's better to be passive, it's better to live your life and care just about your family and friends only.
And what both of you are saying, there's this depth of domestic support and help within Ukraine and local communities helping. And so I'd like to hear from both of you more about that, but also so about domestic support, but also international support. And maybe that's international philanthropic organizations that sort of the role those play together, that there's a lot of local support and domestic support, but also international philanthropic organizations. And I'll say that I ask this because we do have a very dedicated audience here, and they want to know how to help. They want to understand the situation. That's part of helping, but they also want to know where they can be involved in, what they can do, what they can tell other people they can do. So if you could say more about domestic support and also international support. And Anzhelika, maybe we could start with you.
Yes, if I may. So I had, and we had, our organization, Voice of Romni, a very great experience of working with philanthropic organizations. At the end of 2022, our organization was supported by the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, and they provided for our organization institutional support for 2 years, which became like large and a big support for us, a core support, and it was a driver of change and development for our organization. And since then, our team has grown tenfold, and we have scaled up our programs in various areas and diversified the organization funding resources. But the main question is that philanthropic organizations and the funds of philanthropes, it is a really great tool for support of Ukrainian, like different NGOs, because this funding is more flexible. And that's why, for example, in our experience with Center for Disaster Philanthropy, we had a core support, like a big funds in our budget, big percent of the funds in our budget for supporting of our team, like main team project managers, meal experts, and etc. And we had an indirect costs. And this is the main thing which not included by big donors, big partners, humanitarian actors. And that's why we are very appreciated for this support. And I want to see in Ukraine also this philanthropic culture as I saw it in US.
Thank you for that. And I would just make a pitch too, because we have audience members that have knowledge of or ties to philanthropic organizations. If you know of ones that might be interested in supporting Voice of Romni, we can put you in touch with Anzhelika Bielova, and she has a very public presence too. So do let us know, because it seems like, I mean, am I right that this sort of the support of philanthropic organizations has empowered local actors in Ukraine?
Yes, that's true. Because they supported us. We were a local organization that just tried to do some things in different regions because of the war, because we had like some small programs and small funds in different regions. And they just saw that we have this force, we have a good team, and we know which priorities is ours, and they just invested in our organization. And we really raised from 4 people in our team to 60 people in our team. And currently, when they funded us, we had a representation only in 2 regions. Now we are working in 7 regions and have 4 regional offices. And this is a really successful story for me. I would say that, because it is true. Of supporting a local organizations and a small organizations.
Yeah. Amidst, I mean, a really horrific war and tragedies, there are these bright, shining lights of people doing really amazing things to protect vulnerable communities in Ukraine. And Yuliya, I wanted to turn to you to ask about maybe more about your students, but also the community in Kharkiv. It sounds like there's a lot with local organizations happening, but also just people stepping up to help individually, like you were talking about 17-year-olds that are now forced to grow up, I guess, really, and are helping out in really significant ways. I wonder if you could say more about the work of local organizations in Kharkiv.
Yeah, thank you for this question, because I was going to start with the local dimension and grassroots organization. As to my estimation, there were more than 3,000 of NGOs in Kharkiv before the full-scale invasion. But during the first months, there appeared more than 400 initiatives within the 1 month. And really, those people who never had any experience in volunteering and civic activities, they jumped into this humanitarian mutual assistance. And actually, there were even new, let's say, humanitarian connections, which were established during the 1 hour, 2 hour. I remember my own experience, and it was very hard to me to torn between my obligation to give panels for foreign universities, for foreign think tanks, media, and from the other point, I was obliged to organize evacuation of people from Kharkiv and nearby towns and villages. And from another point of view, there were a lot of philanthropic initiatives organized by different people who knew me, but they were in England, in the Netherlands, in Germany. They collected the humanitarian aid around their churches, around the pre-existing NGOs, not only those which were related to Ukraine before the full-scale invasion. And I remember how every hour somebody called me and said, okay, we collected a truck of humanitarian aid, but we can, deliver it only to the western border of Ukraine, because our drivers are not allowed to go to the frontline region. So can you help us? And it was very challenging, to connect those people who, for example, evacuate people from Kharkiv and brought them to Lviv, to the western border, and we asked them to take a humanitarian aid on their way back. But what is interesting here is, for me, that during first 2 or 3 months, and mostly not only because of self-organization, but also because a large organization and well-known organization in Ukraine and outside Ukraine, they were able and capable to sustain these activities, to make it, let's say, more sustainable, more strongly connected with the stakeholders in different parts of the world, let's say. So yeah, as for me, philanthropic is very important and was very important to save Ukrainian cities and people during first crucial months of invasion. But what came next is kind of institutionalization of these initiatives, and now we face with very different but numerous activities on the every single dimension of this. For example, today, the head of Kharkiv regional administration reported that his colleague from Volyn region, from Khmelnytsky region, from Zhytomyr region came themselves to Kharkiv to provide some assistance from this region. So it's not only about how people connected on this horizontal level. It's very important that decentralization in Ukraine also caused this mutual assistance from community to community, from region to region. And I would say that level of cohesion in Ukraine is still very high. But I would like to, let's say, finish these remarks with an appeal to American community, to appeal to European Union citizens. Please do apply to the representatives and politicians in your countries. Because yesterday I attended the Deutsche Welle talk show and I was asked as an expert, what is the reason of this destruction? And the answer is obvious. It's Russia, of course. But also we can avoid all this destruction if Ukraine has been provided with ammunition in proper time. Because it was reported that we are going out of ammo, we are going out of weapon. Our army on the front line and our soldiers on the front line, they're exhausted. So we need this assistance on a very different levels. And please do what you can do in your field, in your community, in your country.
Underlying all of this is that it's better to prevent these tragedies than to respond to them, right? And so if countries can defend themselves, then things are much better. Speaking of the international community, because you were talking about philanthropic organizations and also the need to continue international support, I know that both of you have been outside of Ukraine recently, and Anzhelika, I know that while you're based in Ukraine, you were part of a really prestigious program, the International Visitor Leadership Program, run by the U.S. Embassy as part of their public affairs, and you traveled to 5 different cities in the United States, DC, Detroit, Kalamazoo, Reno, and New Orleans, which is an interesting set of cities to get, I mean, really different impressions of Americans. I wonder, could you tell us, what was your impression of how Americans are thinking about Ukraine now, having visited recently?
Yeah, so in Washington also. Yeah, it was in March 2023, and it was an amazing opportunity. And at that time, in US, I felt support from everyone I met. And we visited many different organizations that work with vulnerable groups, including Ukrainians who had to leave their homes in Ukraine. And in New Orleans, I met Mark, a representative of NGO, who came as a volunteer to the frontline areas at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine and provided medical support to those who had evacuated from the frontline territories. When I came to the session to his NGO, he said, who is from Ukraine? I said, me. And he said, Slava Ukraini. It was so important for me and so supportive. It was really great. And this program was extremely important for me. I learned a lot about the work of NGOs in US, the governmental funding, support for the economical empowerment of vulnerable groups, and the culture of philanthropy. And as I already mentioned, I'd like to see philanthropy develop in Ukraine as well.
I'm glad that that was a positive trip for you, and we'll do a group Slava Ukraini at the end as well, and Heroin Slava. So turning to Yuliya, I know that you're currently in Germany, right? I think you're in Berlin right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. I'm serving as a visiting senior researcher at Free University of Berlin, and recently I also was affiliated with Center for Eastern European and International Studies. So that is my way to influence German audiences with the Ukrainian messages. But I would say that when I arrived here in the beginning of 2023, I was pretty aware about prejudgmental attitudes of some German politicians, journalists towards Ukraine. And let us be true that German-Russian relations were pretty warm before the full-scale invasion. And for me, was kind of surprised how fast uh, Germany reacted to the crisis and how bravely they accept more than 1 million of Ukrainian refugees during the first year of invasion, how the most of think tanks, media will bravely covered Ukrainian situation, and they try to debunk Russian propaganda in many senses. And what is also kind of a good impression from my side about Germany, that a lot of experts who are, well, let's say, representatives of this realism in international studies, they admitted that probably they were wrong about Russian real intentions towards Ukraine, and how they all need to unite and work with their politicians to provide more support to Ukraine. And it is an interesting fact that Germany, according again to the sociological surveys that I mentioned recently, Germany is the only country who is still rising in recognition among Ukrainians as the committed ally and friend of Ukraine. Because they started just with 1% in February 2022, and now it is 45% of Ukrainians who believe that Germany is committed friend of Ukraine. It's second position, because first position is still belongs to the United States of America. But during past year, these beliefs of Ukrainians that United States is a really committed friend of Ukraine decreased a bit. So it's very interesting dynamic, and I would say that unfortunately this full-scale invasion made any Ukrainian military expert and the specialist in international relations. But I would say that people are very sensitive what happened not only in their communities or in their country, in neighboring regions, but also what is happening in international politics or foreign policy making, because unfortunately we are very dependent on this, and sometimes this dependency means that people can lose their lives, even being at their homes in Ukraine.
Well, so you've partially already answered this, Yuliya, but I wanted to ask both of you, how worried are you about declining international support? I mean, it seems like domestic support and work, people are exhausted by the war, but also are showing a remarkable amount of resilience at the same time. But how worried are you about declining international attention and support? And Anzhelika, maybe you'd like to start.
Yeah, so I see that the international support decreased, and it is one of the priority of our advocacy currently. As I said, that, for example, the humanitarian aid programs are currently decrease their funding even in frontline territories. I'm even not speaking about western part of Ukraine. And it is important to explain every time the context and explain how people need a humanitarian aid still. And I know that a lot of humanitarian actors started to create their own strategies and about the changing the priorities, about how to leave Ukraine, for example, in 2026. And it is really important things that we have to raise again and again, because hostilities because the missile attacks, they are not ending. And we have to provide both an humanitarian aid and different economical empowerment, livelihood, resilience, supporting programs for people. And we have to advocate for that. And at the same time, I see that we have to do invisible groups visible. For example, we are representing, and I'm representing the Roma community, and we have to explain in context again and again to different stakeholders that, for example, people in frontline territories, Roma community need like some different approach because they have problems with access to information. For example, we registered a lot of people to MPCA during 2023, and a lot of Roma families came to the registration, and they have, for example, one telephone number for 3 families. And these people don't have access to information about humanitarian aid, different services, different programs. We have to support them more because they are in vulnerable situation. And stakeholders have to pay more attention on vulnerable groups as Roma, LGBTQI plus community, and etc.
That's a really powerful message about vulnerable groups and how they need continued support and even more support likely now than they did 2 years ago when the full-scale invasion started. And they needed support before the full-scale invasion, of course, as well. Yuliya, would you like to respond?
Yeah, if I may, because I also want to speak on behalf of scholars at risk, because international support, it's not only about money or humanitarian aid, it's also about how to sustain Ukrainian studies all over the world, or at least within the democratic world, I would say. I wouldn't say only Western world, because we also tried to incorporate some countries from Global South to this coalition of democratic support and front lines of democracies, much broader than Western part of Europe or the United States or Northern America. So it's really needed to sustain Ukrainian studies, because I would say from my own position, despite all the positive shifts in European policymaking, in the American policymaking or response towards what happened in 2022 during Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, still there are a lot of scholars at risk who are seeking every half a year grants, and some of them have no places to return. But what is important here, it's understanding that probably Ukrainian studies all over the world will be beneficial not only for Ukrainians themselves, but also for those who are fighting with Russia or authoritarian regimes all over the world, because we have a great experience in analyzing and fighting with them. The second point about the international support, I would say here that, yeah, the financial support and military support is decreased, but as a political scientist, I want to be optimistic here. Okay, we are very dependent on elections, both in the European Union and in the United States, which are forthcoming. But I do believe that values will be more important for politicians after they will be elected than temporary, interest how to play games with their voters with probably different views. So now they try to balance and try to be supported by different groups. And I believe that this polarization could be overcome after election cycle will be ended. And I still believe that power of Western democracies or of democracies, it is lies in the ability to address global problems, to fight for values, but not only for money of Russia oil or Russia elites. So that is my view, and I try to be optimistic. But the other trends of democracies for me is ability to react what citizens want. So I really rely here on our audience If we will be active citizens ourselves, we can force our elites to finish this war with the positive results for Ukraine. Thank you.
I love what you said about how understanding Ukraine is important, not just for Ukrainians, but for the whole world, and understanding how to resist an authoritarian power and one that's actually invaded your country, and a model of civil society and resilience. And I think that that's very true. And I also, building on that, I know that both of you have spoken recently with the highest of international organizations. So Anzhelika has spoken to the UN. Yuliya, you've worked with the EU on initiatives. And I wanted to ask you more about that. Anzhelika, can you share with us what you talked to the UN about and what you emphasized there?
Yes, thank you. So CSW, Commission on Status of Women in UN in New York, it is really a big event every year, and it was really so big opportunity for me and for the whole Roma women's movement to make the Roma women voices heard. So during my speech, I drew attention to the importance of supporting Roma women's leadership, investing in the development of Roma activists and leaders, funding local Roma organizations, including Roma women's NGOs in the national feminist movement, and jointly fighting against gender-based violence. I also raised an attention of GBV in Roma communities, and as I said, it is a taboo topic in Roma community. And our organization, Voice of Romni, conducted a unique qualitative research in Ukraine. So it was an interviews both with Roma women and Roma men about their gender practices and their experience of gender-based violence. And why it is unique research? Because our sociologist company said that there is no alternative research in Europe and worldwide. And this is an important research, and we are trying currently to create a tool how to work with Roma community, with patriarchal community, on preventing and combating gender-based violence. And unfortunately, the results of this research showed that 70% of our respondents faced different types of gender-based violence. I also expressed the importance of applying a comprehensive approach to overcoming poverty. It is a combining a humanitarian component with economical empowerment and educational programs, using the example of Voice of Romni's work in Roma communities in partnership with different partners, stakeholders as Mercy Corps, Oxfam, and UN Women Ukraine. I also shared the positive steps taken by the state to overcome poverty and achieve gender equality, the implementation of Roma strategy till 2030 by State Service of Ukraine for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Consciousness, and the involvement of Roma women leaders in the coordination council, the dialogue of the Ombudsman's office with the Roma community on the ground, and the joint search for solutions. But also, I raised an issue that we have a lack of funding for implementation of Roma strategy till 2030. It is an important document for Roma community in Ukraine, and the implementation of Roma strategy, it is an important component, an important indicator for EU when they are assessing the possibility of involvement, of participation of Ukraine in EU. I also raised a positive approach of United Nations OCHA with a joint mission to the compact settlements of the Roma community in Zakarpattia, which led to the creation of a group to support Roma community in accordance with the priorities of the UN country team for 2024. And it is a positive approach which had to be, which other partners have to use, because the field visits, it is a really important component of the work of different partners, not only humanitarian actors, but also representatives of government and etc. And I also emphasize the flexible approach and importance of flexible approach of the partners who listen to the needs of vulnerable communities and allocate assistance to regions that are often not a priority for humanitarian organizations. It is extremely important that the voices of Ukrainian activists are heard at the international level, so that the international community does not forget about the war started by Russia and prioritize assistance to Ukraine. Because in my speech, I many times said that this situation and this humanitarian situation in Ukraine is caused by Russia's full-scale invasion, and international community have to support Ukraine and have to remember about that, because I see that, as I said before many times, the decreasing, unfortunately, of help to Ukraine, and I hope it will be changed.
Yeah, underlying all of this is that Russia is the cause of this humanitarian tragedy and the dire nature of this humanitarian tragedy. I want to turn to Yuliya and ask about your work with the EU too. What do you emphasize when you're working on, you worked for, it was the Team Ukraine initiative with the European Union, I think. What was your focus in working on them, and what did you emphasize?
Well, this expert initiative was established in 2016, and it unites regional-based experts who worked both with the local population and try to bring more information about what is EU. The EU is what they are doing, how the functioning the most institutions, but also we try to make more clear and provide more support towards democratic and the European values. The second part of mine went there was the teaching EU study days. It's an educational project for school children and students in Ukraine, which allows them to study to learn how to advocate the interests, how to work with projects, how to jump into the projects which are available for them under the EU umbrella and the EU neighborhood programs. I want to address actually the question which appeared in a Q&A about the what is kind of overweigh the things that divided people before the full-scale invasion, because it's also the question which I address to myself as a researcher pretty frequently. I would like to say that, yes, of course, we have this diversity, but it is not a division. Ukraine is not a torn country, as Professor Huntington told us in 2003 by visiting Ukraine. To be true, this mutual cohesion and regional cohesion is very high in Ukraine. What is still dividing people, I would say, it is more about the economical inequality and the lifestyle that some people with a very high income allowed them to, to possess. Because there are more and more scandals about those who are avoiding mobilization, being, young men who are, for example, traveling abroad for vacation to spend them in exotic countries. And yeah, it is really disillusional for those people who surviving every day, who has no electricity for a whole day, who need to, wake up at in the middle of the night because electricity is appeared just to make a laundry, or to cook something. Yeah, of course, these inequalities are very challenging for the future development of Ukraine. And from the other point of view, what is threatening me here, it's the problems with the rule of law, the ability or tasks to provide some reforms, democratic reforms, and from the other point of view, a kind of seduction by power, which current Ukrainian elites experience to be true. So as for me, it's very important to keep NGOs and civil society in general very empowered. And from another point of view, it's very important to come back to decentralization reform and complete it after the war will be finished.
I like what you said about diversity is not division. And I think that segues to another question we had about the Ukrainian and Romani diaspora that Anzhelika will likely want to answer first. But I'll ask Jeffrey Glynn had this question. If you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask that directly, Jeff.
Yeah. By the way, thank you for your comments today. It's very enlightening and heartfelt. I just wanted to know what your thoughts are about how diaspora, excuse me, is organizing itself outside of the country, and how you relate, because that's a very different experience for Ukrainians and Romani outside of Ukraine, and how you see those things coming together to support your efforts.
So is your question about Roma people abroad or inside Ukraine, and how they are helping each other, helping Ukrainian people?
Yes, about how you see those communities outside of Ukraine organizing or becoming more focused on creating CSOs or supporting efforts in or outside of Ukraine, because they're also people who have needs outside of Ukraine, Ukrainian communities, Romani communities.
Yeah, so I used to live actually when the full-scale war was started. I used to live in Budapest, and I felt the social cohesion in Hungary, for example, and a lot of Roma communities helps me and my family in Hungary. And when I lived there, I also was involved, and I worked for Roma Human Rights Center and Voice Amplified, international organizations who are helping to Ukrainian refugees, including Roma refugees from Ukraine. And it is really great support, and the international community and Roma community outside of Ukraine is really helping a lot to Ukrainian refugees. And I felt it myself, and it was a horrible month of my life, because I came with, it was 6 of us, of my family, my grandma, my mom, my daughter, my sister, and my niece. And we tried to find an apartment or accommodation for us, and they helped us. And it was really amazing. And one woman from Hungary, her name Hilda, I will remember her name for all my life, because he provided a free accommodation for my family. And it was really amazing opportunity and support for me. And I also had a work, so we assessed shelters in Hungary, which accepted Ukrainian refugees. And we tried to assess the living conditions, support for them. And it was like a quite good level of living conditions for them. And it was some some Roma, some shelters who were accepting Roma community, and it was like quite good conditions and living conditions and services which is provided to Roma community. And this is great that Roma NGOs outside of Ukraine was very, so they tried to help everyone, and they tried to be like to observe and every time to review, to assess the situation of Roma refugees from Ukraine. So I would say that Roma community outside of Ukraine is very supportive, and they were trying to support Ukrainians, like Roma people who live in Ukraine also. But I also would like to say about Roma NGOs in Ukraine, because a lot of Roma NGOs, as our NGO, as Voice of Romni, are providing help not only for Roma community. Of course, it is a priority for us. It is our focus. We have access to Roma communities, but we are also helping a lot of Ukrainian IDPs, and this is a really quite a good example of social cohesion, because you know, a lot of, and for me, it is also one of the tools against the discrimination of Roma people in Ukraine, because a lot of Ukrainian people are coming to our offices to receive some help or services, and they are often like asking us, "Who is a Romni? Is it a god or something like that?" And I'm saying, and we are saying, our coordinators are saying that this is a Roma woman, and Roma, it is a Roma man. So we are explaining some parts of our culture and this is a really good tool for me to work on inclusion. This is great.
That's amazing that there's that the Roma minority are sort of like they're the I don't know even know if I want to say silver lining, because there's nothing good about war, but like that there's that they're through their efforts to help society are helping Ukrainians who are not Roma, who are not also Roma, but providing this sort of general service. And you don't always see that a minority group is providing was kind of like a public service for everyone, not you know, in the whole country. And that's really remarkable. We are just past the top of the hour, so I will encourage our audience, if you have any final comments and questions, to ask those now. And I'd like to put a final question to Yuliya and Anzhelika, if you have a few more moments for us. I know we're past the hour. Oh, great. Thank you. What is the most important message you would want to leave with our audience about really about anything related to Ukraine, maybe about diversity in Ukraine, but in general, what is the most important message? And we can start with Yuliya.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I also wanted to remind that there are not only a diaspora of Roma, there is a huge diaspora of Ukrainians who are really doing their best to accept and to integrate refugees. They're doing their best to communicate with politicians and organize demos and protest against Ukraine to be abandoned. Actually, to be true, in 10 minutes, I'm running to the diaspora event, which is really huge one. And tomorrow I will participate my weekend to work with them to develop some messages from Ukrainian diaspora here in Germany in front of Ukrainian recovery conference. So we will discuss how diaspora could be helpful in Ukrainian recovery. But of course, before the recovery, we need to win first. So I would like to make my request not only for Ukrainians who are our attendees today, but to everyone. Please connect to Ukrainian organizations directly. Please do try to communicate to Ukrainian diaspora in your neighborhood, or probably in your states or in your countries. Please do not feel yourself exhausted about the news which are coming from Ukraine. Believe me, people there are more exhausted that you are tired with the bad news. Believe me that. And addressing to my own experience. It's very hard even for those who are outside Ukraine. Just now, as me being a visiting researcher, I live at the same time in two countries because I need to work at Karazin University. I need to care about my mom and dad. I reacting to every single airstrike alarm signal in Kharkiv and try to connect with them and ask them to go to the shelter because they have no such new application on their cell phones. I need to be supportive towards my student there in Kharkiv or elsewhere in Ukraine or outside Ukraine. And from another point of view, you need to address the expectation and high standard of Western academia. Like they were saying in Alice in Wonderland, you need to run very fast to stay on the position you are now. So I would like to ask everyone, please do not feel yourself exhausted. Feel yourself brave, energetic as Ukrainians do, but please have some compassion towards what we experience now. And the best way for me to overcome my own stress is to act. Please do act and co-act with us together.
Thank you. I feel like that deserves a round of applause that we can't fully achieve on a webinar, but I think the sort of don't get tired. Keep helping, keep coming. And we have an audience that shows up every week. And that alone, that is tremendously important because you can then spread the word as well about how to help and keep attention on Ukraine. And then Anzhelika, your final, most important sort of message that you'd like to impart.
Yeah, I just want to start that in 2023, when I came to US, I saw a lot of Ukrainian flags. And when I came this year in New York for CSW, I saw Ukrainian flag only in the district near the Ukrainian home and where is the Ukrainian diaspora is located. This is really important for us. This like a quite simple thing. And my message is also to continue to support Ukraine in every possible way in the informational space, in social media, with donations, with advocacy, in any way you can. Because today, it is Ukrainians who are fighting for freedom and democracy, not only of Ukraine, but also for the world.
And I love how you put that, and we can't emphasize it enough, but fighting for the world, I think.
Yes.
We have two important messages of support in the Q&A from Mike Kedover. He says, no question, but thanks for the thoughtful discussion and for your examples of resilience and empathy. Is this Всё будет Ukraina? Did I get that close to correct? Is that okay? And then Barbara... Okay, thank you, Yuliya. I knew that someone here could do that correctly. And Barbara Leopold says, brava, virtual clapping, which I agree with. That also, Anzhelika's remarks also deserve a hearty round of applause that can't be fully accomplished on a webinar. A tremendous thank you to both of you, because I know how busy you are. Yuliya, in 10 minutes, you have to be somewhere else, or maybe 5 minutes now. And Anzhelika, I know that the amount of work you're doing has to sometimes be an overwhelming amount of work, but you're both such remarkably resilient people. We're really honored to have your time today. And thank you to our audience who has joined us and who joins us every week and stays overtime every week, because we never finish at the top of the hour like we're meant to. Come back next week. That's one important way to support this. We'll be talking about a different topic for us, stand-up comedy in the time of war. Because there's so many dimensions to what is happening today. So come back this time next Friday. That will be our last event that we have scheduled right now. So please do join us. Please do keep your attention on Ukrainian organizations and reach out to us if you have ideas about philanthropic organizations that we can put Anzhelika in touch with for Voice of Romni. That would be tremendously helpful. So I'll give an opportunity for my co-organizers to say any final words, Roman Alexenko, Jeffrey Glenn, Olga Nikolska, if you'd like to. say anything.
I just wanted to say thank you, and again, to our audience, a call to action. Any amount is getting us closer. So it doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to be you give up anything. It just means you just need to take some action. So to echo what our two guests so eloquently said, and thank you for joining us today and for continuing your work for Ukraine and for everyone. So thank you.
Thanks.
I just want to echo Jeff and say that, I've been moved by your stories, Yuliya and Anzhelika. It's hard for me to speak right now. But there's one thing that Sarah just said, like, this is going to be our last session next week. And I can't believe it's going to be the last session. I want to go on. I want to continue. I have ideas. I have topics to offer. I have people lined up. So I don't know how the audience will feel about continue on, and if that's something that we all decide to do, we can just keep going a little bit further. Why not, if we still can? So this is to be discussed, and I hope that our audience will continue to pay attention to Ukraine as everyone emphasized right now, and find your Ukrainian flags, put them up. We need that right now. This is a strong message. This is probably the most difficult time for Ukraine right now. I'm not going to say anymore. You know that. You pay attention to politics. You pay attention to events in Ukraine because you keep coming to these events. So thank you, and have a safe rest of the week.
Yes, thank you to that. We need to do, at least for the ones on this, the speakers here and everything, we need to do a hearty Slava Ukrainia and Heroyam Slava. We can respond, we can say it and respond to ourselves, I think. So is everyone ready? If you're ready you don't have to, Roman, you're driving. I want you to be safe, so you don't have to unmute. But all right, ready? Slava Ukraini! Heroyam Slava!
Heroyam Slava!
And we hope to see you all next week. Thank you again, Yuliya and Anzhelika.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. And thanks for really thankful audience today. Bye.